to You Choose. Victor, you look different.
Oh,
Did
do
did
I?
you grow do you grow your hair out?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a rough week. What can I say, you know?
Oh no, what does Victor look like after a rough week?
Right, I probably should have gone the other direction with that, shouldn't I?
Abby, welcome. Thank you for being a co-host on You Choose today and taking Victor's place since he had to be out. Will you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, thanks for having me. So I'm
Yeah.
Abby. You may have seen me a couple shows ago talking about platform things. I work at Syntasso, and I'm also a co-lead of the platforms working group in the CNCF. So anyone who's interested in chatting more with lots of people building platforms, come join us in the CNCF Slack channel WG Platforms, and there's lots of interesting things going on. So yeah.
What uh, what is that whole thing? I mean, like surely you don't just chat platforms. Like, is there like more specific stuff that the platforms working group does?
Yeah. So the working group right now is within the structure of the technical advisory groups, which is within the kind of technical domain within the CNCF. There's some changes coming, so we're figuring some things out. But basically, what that means is that we acknowledge and know that platforms are an important part of kind of cloud native journeys for different organizations, and we want to think about how the projects at the CNCF help and also could help even more with people who are building platforms, but also think about how end user companies, people who actually just use those projects, interact with them, what kind of support they need. So we do certain initiatives. So for example, a couple of years ago, there was a white paper defining platforms because that was
Cool.
new at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, another paper that was put out around the maturity assessment around platform engineering, so the act of building platforms. And yeah, now we've got a couple more things in the motion. So we've got some really amazing research around what uh, executing um, platform as a product looks like in organizations in the wild. So this is a
Uh-huh.
really fun way to see what's actually happening with organizations. So yeah, there's lots of like kind of formal work going on. And there's also just a community of people identifying what work would be useful and
Uh-huh.
discussing their own experiences along the way.
That's awesome. So if you want to get involved with some thought leadershiping, you can do that. I like
Absolutely.
saying thought leadership in a silly way. It's because people take themselves so seriously sometimes. And then and also if you just want to hang out with other people who are also building platforms and seeing what's working for them and what's not working for them. There's like platform coffee get-togethers and there's all like in real life and virtually. But
We've just
during
got
yeah.
approval for an in-venue coffee venue for mornings in KubeCon, so should be fun.
Heck yeah. I'll see you there. I'll be getting coffee
Nice.
with you and all the platform friends during KubeCon. And anyone watching is invited to join. Even if you're not at KubeCon, they might not know. I don't know. Maybe they will. Maybe you need a badge. I don't know. Stop talking, Whitney. So let's recap last week's episode. We talked about one-shot actions. So as part of the season, we're building an IDP or internal developer platform. We talked about API and state management. That's an episode where Abby was a guest. We talked about GitOps and cluster level policy as part of building a platform. And then last week we talked about one-shot actions, which is the CI of CI/CD. Would you say the continuous integration? What what's an example? What are some examples
I
of
think the
one-shot actions?
CI part of CD is an example of some one-shot actions you might want to take. So I think one of the
Okay.
quintessential examples is you have to build a container that you want to run, right? That
Test
is
some
like
code, build a
a
container
key
image.
a key
Yeah.
part. First of all, I think that's where y'all started, which is cool, within YouTube's, but it's a key part of that journey of building a platform and executing that. And it's a great example. So I think also, running tests, etc. But one of the interesting parts of why I wouldn't want to limit it to only CI
Mm-hmm.
or inclusive of CD is there's lots of other just things that have to happen. So
Yeah.
things like I don't know, running a report for an audit or um,
Okay.
managing manual approvals or notifications of people about the state of things. Like I think one shot actions is a really nice bucket of term to say the thing you need to do once. I think Victor said this, like, do once and only once this thing. And that can
Uh-huh.
be something that happens regularly on a per event or per time schedule, or it can be other types of actions. So
What was remarkable to me, and I even screenshotted it so I could talk about it this time, was how complicated it can get. So as part of Christian represented Argo workflows, and as part of his presentation, he showed this this Argo workflow that is done at CERN, which CERN is the European Council for Nuclear Research. So this is a physics analysis workflow, and it produces, this one in particular produces data from physics experiments in the Hadron Collider. But that's one shot, all right. But here's a question I have. One thing that kept coming up last week is people kept using this term glorified cron job. And I don't understand, if it's a one-shot action, why is it a cron job? Like, a cron job happens, it's time-based and it happens repeatedly, right? Yeah.
I think you've poked a hole in the logic. So you could say that, like, it's a glorified job for sure, but yeah,
Okay.
cron jobs tend to have a some sort of regularity, right? Either every minute,
Mm-hmm.
every day, or whatever, and that can be done with these things, but I don't think that's the example that we were mostly talking about last week, right? Like,
Yeah.
mostly we were talking about things that happen on an event, which is more action oriented rather than time oriented. Yeah.
Would you say crossplane is a glorified cron job?
This is how you get me kicked off of this, Whitney. I think a controller could be considered a glorified cron job.
Yeah.
Controllers also react to events, so it's not maybe 100% accurate. But that idea of something that with regularity does a reconcile is probably a more accurate application of cron job for sure. So yeah, Cradix, Crossplane, all of our controllers.
Your body language got smaller. So is there something else we should say about one-shot actions and why we need them as part of our platform before we talk about the tech from last week?
Yeah, I just think that that widening and making sure we're thinking about things outside of just CI when it comes to one-shot
Mm-hmm.
actions is a key part of this, because it's all of those things that we can't have declarative code for. So we live in a
Mm-hmm.
world where, GitOps is reigns supreme. We want that idea of a declared state and allow us to reconcile on that. And I would definitely advocate that by default. But the reality is that there's lots of other things that have to go around that, right? Even something as simple as building the container, but business processes, other tech that doesn't work within that way. And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a big part of
Validating
building
a
platforms is business
schema. Yeah.
processes. So
Yeah. So with the tools we had on to do, the people who presented and the tools were Tecton and Argo Workflows and GitHub Actions. Now, the guests, Vincent from Tecton and Christian from Argo Workflows, they said themselves that both of those projects have gotten big enough that their feature set has pretty much converged. So I'm going to talk about them like they're one thing.
are you gonna give it a good name, a good like portmanteau name, like come by?
Oh, yeah. Tectargo work gone. I don't know. So their thing is it's bring your own compute, which is, we're saying, only in contrast to the other one, but I should have mentioned that one first probably. Bring your own compute, and also those two projects are both Kubernetes native projects. And so our other one, GitHub Actions, in contrast, it's not bring your own compute. It can be, but also GitHub can supply ephemeral machines, and it's not Kubernetes related. So there's actually like use cases for when you might want to use either kind. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you see it's often used in tandem, those two things?
In tandem. So I definitely see the benefits to both. I think in tandem,
Mm-hmm.
I can't say I've seen that in the wild myself or use that in the wild myself, but I think a good example would be if you could automate with one in like certain environments that have different levels of security requirements. That's
Yeah.
I'm porting across examples I found in other tools where you might combine a SaaS product, which in this case is GitHub Actions, with
Yep.
a self-hosted product, which could be TechArgo, Tech Workflows, that one, and that like you can actually see good arguments for having both of them in your organization, even though that feels duplicate of effort or cost or that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
And if you're using GitHub already, having the GitHub Actions close to your code, it seems very useful if it's not a sensitive, you know, if there's not sensitive data being used and it can run on a
Yeah,
public machine.
yeah,
But otherwise, if you're doing sensitive things or just trying to be super efficient about compute, then those are reasons to use Argo workflows and or Tekton. I'm not sure why you'd want to use both. I think they probably said, and I forget. You can rewatch. So we had a vote in the CNCF Slack channel. If you're not there and you want to vote today, please you can find the details in the description of this video for how to get on CNCF Slack and then how to find the You Choose channel once you're there. But that's where we have our votes. And the winner is Argo Workflows. Bum, ba-da-dum. But actually, we're going to talk about that again next week because we're going to have Victor do the demo. So that was an exciting trumpet noise, and we did it. And now it's time to move on and and get with the present. We're going to talk about graphical user interfaces for your platform, or GUIs. I like to think of. The word GUI. I can't not think of like gooey candy or like a marshmallow or something. The G
that
O
must
O
be
E
why it's so
Y.
popular. That's what made
Yeah,
everyone's like,
it
ooh, a
is kind of
marshmallow.
gooey. Yeah. But here's okay, right off the bat with GUIs. Okay, let's even just go the technology that's been chosen so far in this chapter, Crossplane. Crossplane itself doesn't have a GUI, but there is a GUI for Crossplane called Komoplane, Komo plane. So it exists. Like Kyverno for policy. Kyverno policy report has a GUI. We talked about Argo CD, GUI. To be Victor, everybody knows about that GUI. The Argo Workflows has a GUI too. So then, if every tool we're using while we build our platform has a graphical user interface, why do we need a freaking graphical user interface technology?
Well, I think so. I don't want to steal the thunder from our guests who are coming up, but I know I've taken from them before, from watching their things before, that one of the benefits is having a single pane of glass, right? And we hear about this, and I know you've already done observability. We hear about in the observability space wanting a single pane of glass, that one-stop shop where you can go and find all the information. And I think that there is an argument and an attempt by the developer portal to become that one-stop shop for application developers on their day-to-day work. So where do I go to ask for things? Where do I go to debug things, or or find out where to go to debug things, and
Uh
where do I
huh.
find documentation and all these things? Instead of having 100 bookmarks, you've got one bookmark, and it may push you out to another UI, but at least it makes a central location to go find it.
Something's broken. There's a one first place I'm going to go to at least find out what's broken and
Yeah,
maybe even fix it from that place.
yeah.
That makes so much sense. You
There is
said
an
I feel
XKCD
like
about that, just to say, but
an
that's the one
XKC.
risk. So, there's 12 standards, and I know what I'll do is I'll make the one standard to rule them all. There's now 13 standards, right? But I think that's the intention, right? And if we go into this with the best possible outcomes, that would be great, right? If you had one spot to go find, all your problems, solve all your problems. So
And then so this we're talking about GUIs. Is the GUI always a web UI? Or in this situation is our platform GUI web UI? We If
these
you
are going
don't
to
know, that's
be the
okay.
interesting ones. So
We could ask at
we
the
may
end
we
with
may
our
have had a
experts on.
conversation about different interfaces at one point in our past lives,
Yeah.
Whitney,
I seem to
with
remember a
GUIs being a
pig.
very popular one. So
Yeah.
I think portals have become synonymous with web interfaces, though there are
Mm-hmm.
interfaces for Kubernetes and things that are done on the command line. So like K9s and some of those that are done as graphical interfaces within a terminal. But so when you talk about like, does every developer
Ah,
platform have a web interface? I think it sort of depends on your user base. So like, for example, I worked at a pretty small startup previously, handful, 20 to 80 developers during my time there as we grew. And we ended up having a CLI as our interface to everything platform because they were
uh-huh.
already kind of there, and that was what the engineers at that organization were used to and wanted. But like, when you're talking about organizations where that isn't their background or their interest, or much larger where you're gonna have more diverse users,
Mm-hmm.
a command line may not be the right place to call home for the platform.
Yeah. And that's something we've been kind of talking about the whole season is if you define your platform capabilities behind an API, then that gives you freedom to present them as more than one interface. So our portals or graphical user interfaces that we're using today are meant to, well, in an ideal situation, not always, but can be wrappers for your APIs.
Yeah.
But let's this acronym, we keep saying the word portal. I want to call out IDP. A lot of people, okay. So when IDP was first, that acronym was first out in the world, it meant identity provider. We're never going to use it in that way today. Not me. Yeah.
Not today.
It can also, we've been using it all season as internal developer platform.
Mhm.
And it also can be called internal developer portal. So these two technologies we're looking at today can often be called portals. They can be called portals. They could call sometimes IDP, referring to the technology itself, meaning internal developer portal. Sometimes web UI. I think you can, and then we're calling it graphical user interface. So the terminology on this one's a little spicy. Would you like to add anything to that?
I just want to say I was curious, and AWS, as always, only confuses things more. Did you know that they also have an
Uh
IDP for intelligent document processing?
oh.
Like, cool. So I feel like there's yeah, when you go looking up IDP, any acronym is gonna throw you into the wolves. But I think IDP in our context has been a particular stomping ground of marketing, right? Of like, what is the who grabs that SEO portals or platforms, right? So yeah.
Scott Rosenberg, who's a guest, just pinged behind the scenes to say connect with an IDP to your IDP to visualize your IDP
Clear as
and
mud. Clear
process a
as mud.
document intelligently. Yeah, cool. So I think maybe have we set the stage to bring our guests on? Oh, do you know what? There's one more thing I want to ask you and talk about myself, and that is, what are we evaluating when we're looking at these technologies? We are looking for a a graphical interface that's a single pane of glass where developers can provision platform technologies capabilities.
Yep.
Um, what else do we want it to do or want it to be or want it to
Yeah, so
not be?
whenever I'm looking at anything platform, well, any technology really, but particularly platform, I'm looking at it from a user and a operator point of view. So from like a user point of view, as you say, like I want to be able to create things, I want to be able to manage things, I want to be able to delete things, I want to be able to do all the things I need to do from
Uh-huh.
that interface. And I want to be able to do it where I don't have to worry about that one extra technology off in the corner. So how easy is it for it to become that one-stop shop? Does it integrate with everything that I need? Uh, and those are sort of like maybe what I care about most as a user: easy to navigate, easy on the eyes, that kind of thing. As an operator, I care about making sure that this, if we're connecting via our IDP to our IDP to view our IDP, um, we need to make sure that the user interface stays aligned with any logic we have behind the scenes. So whether that be a part of one-shot actions or the platform, if those are separate in your case, like how does an operator configure, manage, update, like keep in sync the user interface with
Mm-hmm.
the logic behind the scenes, if those are two separate pieces. So
I'm curious. Okay, if I'm a user, the first time I provision a capability, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what my choices are. I don't know what's available to me. So I want something like a portal that's pretty, that has buttons that I can navigate and like find education as part of my provisioning. Awesome. But then the 100th time I provisioned that capability, I don't want to have to go through a portal anymore. That's tedious. I'm clicking around, it's taking forever. I want a CLI experience or like some sort of like template or some
Scripting.
IDP. Yes, I want it to be bam. So I'm curious about how each of these technologies handles the first time, the education time versus the 100th time.
Ooh,
Something.
good one.
Thanks. And
I'm thinking like my experience with AWS in particular, for example. I think GCP does this as well, where if you do things through the UI, you can actually like click a little info thing, and they will tell you what the CLI command is to do that. And of course, there's a million ways to be able to automate these things. You know, you can use different infrastructures, code tools, etc. But staying completely native to their, you know, system, to their platform, you can click around in the UI and it generates that CLI command for you, and it basically teaches you the next time you do this, like
here's how
grab
it can
this
be
and go
easy.
off and script easy.
Yes.
Which is an interesting, would be like a very kind of advanced maybe way of handling that difference between first time and continued times. So
yeah, I love that. And then the other thing I want is if I create, so if this is my single pane of glass, what about the stuff I create that I don't use the interface to create? What about something I create with the command line? Is my single pane of glass, is this portal going to discover it for me and still show it to me as part of all my assets, or do I have to create it through the portal to be able to see it? That's the other thing I'm curious about.
Nice. I like it.
Cool. And that said, let's introduce our guests and our technologies. So Scott's coming on first. Here you come, Scott. Hello, welcome, friends. Introduce yourself, please. Hello.
My name is Scott Rosenberg. I'm the lead architect in the CTO office at TerraSky, a global systems integrator, and a big fan of Backstage, and excited to be here for the third time.
Yeah, third time. You've done so well. We keep having you back. So we'll see you actually in just a few seconds and get your presentation going. Will you please share your screen while you're backstage? Thank you.
Yes.
And Sebastian, hello. Welcome.
Hello.
Introduce yourself, please.
Hi. So I'm Sebastian, but you can call me Sebi. I'm half French, half Dutch. That's why I have this weird accent. I'm a developer advocate at Port, and based in the southeast of France. And I have 5 cats, including 1 cat here, and she will probably jump on the screen on the keyboard during my demo.
And your very small 5-minute window.
Exactly.
I don't know. That'll win you my vote if there's cat appearance. All right.
I'm sure you should watch out for the cat puke as you're walking around. You know?
All right, Sebi, we'll see you shortly. Okay, Scott. Abby's our timekeeper today. She'll tell you when to start, and then do your thing.
You can start now.
Great. So today we're talking about Backstage. Now, if we go through a small demo here, we're going to see some integration with most of the tools that we've seen throughout the show. So one of the things that we can see here is a standard Backstage that's up and running. In this case, the Backstage instance, though, what's important is that it has nothing configured. What I'm doing is just applying some cross-plane configurations in my Kubernetes cluster now. And what we can see here is one of the first plugin capabilities where we can auto-discover CRDs from Kubernetes, create a template in the UI. We're filling out all of the forms. This is auto-discovered from Kubernetes APIs. We come in, set in any of our settings, and we push our manifest to Git. So just what is really important, this is following GitOps principles. Nothing gets applied to our cluster. Creates a manifest in Git for my PostgreSQL database in this case. We can see that we're adding different annotations here, things of that sort. We're going to use the better tool that lost in GitOps, but FluxCD instead of Argo CD, because we care about technology. And so we are merging our pull request. This, in the end, we can see currently we only have one component, the default example website that comes with Backstage. But while we look at this, when we discover our XRDs, we also automatically generate API endpoints here. We get full API documentation implementation within Backstage out of the box, a really nice capability. We can see also that our claim got ingested automatically, so we didn't need to do anything. GitOps created the cluster. This gets ingested in our UI. We can see different crossplane settings through different plugins. We can get whatever visibility we want. We get crossplane visualization here, all of the managed resources, claims, YAML visualization sort. We could also write other plugins that, for example, show it in a graph view, similar to Camoplane that was mentioned previously, right? We have full capabilities for viewing things. But one of the main challenges in IDPs is, how do I deal with day two? How do I deal with the fact that I want to deprecate a specific version of Postgres and I want to add a new version? So what we're going to use is Kyverno, another tool that's been chosen here in the past. We're going to update our XRD to support the new version, 16.7 of Postgres. We're changing the default and adding that to our array and applying a Kyverno policy that basically mentions that we're deprecating 16.2 and 16.4. Automatically, the platform will recognize this, or the portal will recognize this, and we can see that 16.7 is our default now. That's great for creating new entities. But if we came in and actually looked at our portal, we can see Kyverno policy reports that report to us in the UI failures saying that version 16.2 is deprecated and will be removed on a specific date. We could view the policy from Kyverno. We get a full end-to-end visibility here within our portal. All of this is possible through the simple plugins of Backstage. We also have the ability here, we're using the scaffolder that is pulling in from Git my current settings with the schema from Kubernetes. We can make any changes here, click review and create. This will create a pull request back in GitHub that will basically update for us. We can see to 16.7 in our manifest. We would merge this and it would make updates. This makes it really easy because every task is completely separated from one another, and all we're doing is connecting through metadata on our components this data. There are no catalog info YAMLs, nothing weird being done here. It's all standard Backstage plugins. That was a matter of about 4 days of building in order to build this entire demo, all of these plugins, which are open source. If we take a look at a bit of a bigger example here, though, this is an actual running environment. We also can ingest any Kubernetes entity, so we can auto-discover anything that exists within Kubernetes, visualize any of our Kubernetes data, utilizing all of the existing plugins. If there were Kyverno policy reports on this as well, we get full visibility end-to-end, ingesting namespaces. Everything can be ingested into our platform, giving us a really good user experience for full management of our entire IDP without really any complexities. We can see it's a dynamic UI for updating anything that we want. We could have as many crossplane claims as we want as well. Now, if we go quickly over a few data points on Backstage, it's used across every industry: technology and software, financial services, e-commerce, media, telecom, healthcare, gaming, automotive, some very big names here, very well used. Public adoption, there's 251 public adopters mentioned, many more that are not in the adopters. 72 companies publicly mentioned building plugins, 6 companies mentioned offering Backstage hosting services, and 10 companies offer consulting and integration services publicly. And these are the numbers of
Time's
traction.
up. Time's up.
Awesome.
Sorry, I don't have a gong like Victor, so I had to make do. I hope it will do.
It will.
Oh my
partner
gosh.
said I needed to give him a warning next time I was going to do that.
No.
Oh my
Warnings.
Scott, I'm gonna,
Why?
I'm gonna need. That was so fast, Scott. You were. It was like I like checked my video. Like, am I somehow watching this at like 2 or 3 times speed? Like, no. Scott's really.
No.
That's Scott. I do need to.
I always watch YouTube videos on 2x and recommend.
Yeah.
I always watch videos on 2x. I recommend people to watch me on half x.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to
yes.
watch that again, slowed down. But thank you so much, Scott, and we'll see you again soon for a question and answer. So that's brings me to a good point. If you have questions, please ask them in chat. We're going to have the last part of the show is Q&A with our experts, and so please ask your questions. And next up we have Sebi. Sebi, I will tell you when to start. Thank you.
You're up. Let's go.
Okay. Oh, by the way, that was really impressive, Scott. Really nice flow. Anyway, so in the previous episodes, the viewers could pick the best tools to build their internal developer platform. So now you have your operators, your GitHub flow, your one-time actions. Okay, but what next? How do you glue that all this stuff together? How do you make your developers self-sufficient? That's something that we often hear in platform engineering, and yes, it's crucial when we talk about platform engineering, about self-sufficient developers. But often we think self-sufficient developers means offering self-service flows like one-time actions. But it's not only that, and I will come back to that in a few seconds. Another thing that I want to clear up, it says internal developer portal platform, okay, but it's not only for developers. Of course, it has been built in the beginning with the developers in mind, but your portal, your platform can benefit the whole organization. And the nice thing is that not only developers will be able to use it, but also I don't know, your VP of engineering, your SREs, your managers. Okay, let's come back on self-sufficient developers. That's what we want. Okay, it's not only self-service action. And the other pillar of any portal are service catalog, okay, bringing together info. And while it's nice to have simple lists like all the image containers of my internal registry, what we really want for the developer or the platform user is to get all the info that he needs in one place. Okay, Abby did a really nice intro for me, by the way. Thank you for that. So the single glass plane. Though it's more than a simple service catalog aggregation, because you have to remember one thing. You have to treat your platform as a product, and like any other product, okay, a platform has a well-defined domain. And there is my cat, of course.
Yeah, my vote.
So I lost okay, no problem. I can do it with my cat in my hands. You still see me. Okay. You need to have a well-defined platform, domain model. Sorry about that. And that's where the model lives. Okay, I have a really opinionated view on that, and I think Victor would agree with me. I think it should be all in CRDs. Okay, but that's not the point of today. And I lost my timer. That will be funny. But anyway, and you define your domain model, and then you ingest data from all different kind of places. Okay, and instead of just aggregate it and gluing it together, what you can really do, because you have defined a domain model that really matches your platform, you can create experiences for a developer, a new way to solve incidents, a new way for the managers to have scorecards about, I don't know, does GitHub Copilot really have an impact of the productivity of my developers? Imagine everything that you want. At Port, we will help you creating those experiences. We will provide you that. So someone told me last week, hey, platform builders don't want Lego bricks, they want Lego sets. Okay, and that's exactly what we can do with Port. And you can combine Lego sets. That's really nice because it's not glued together. How do we do that in Port? The main concept is defining your domain model, and we do that with blueprints. You can easily do that. We have a no-code approach. That means that yeah, you don't need to code anything. You can click around. Of course, it's backed by an API and a Terraform provider, and you create your domain. And look at this, you can create relationships between your different blueprints, so you can bring together stuff that doesn't belong together in the real world, but which makes sense for your platform. Once you have that, you can go crazy. You can start building your dashboards, creating your experiences. Like, let's imagine I'm a developer and I'm working on the ads service. Look, in one click, I got everything that I need to have. The link to my dashboards, to we embed the README just to make it nice. If you have any APIs, we embed them here. And we can have something like plan my day. I log in the morning. Okay, I have my open PRs, the PRs waiting for me, my JIRAs. We have self-service action, of course. So here I say, hey, I can change the ticket status, anything I want. Okay, cool. Let's also think about other things that you're not thinking of, like I would like to collect the feedback.
Uh-oh. Thank you so
Is that-
much.
I wanted to give the cat more time, Sebi, but I feel like that is the one job I have. So
Thank
Okay.
you so much, both of you, for presenting.
Is that my? Oh, it's my timer which is running. Okay, there we go. No, sorry,
Um,
I had also a timer. Sorry.
you had more sounds coming at you.
So those of us who are joining us live, this is your opportunity to ask questions. So please do that. We do have just one kind of statement question, but that came in during Scott's presentation, so we'll start with that. But Scott can't share his screen again. But Josh asked, "Can you show the scaffolding that was just mentioned? Can you describe, Scott, the scaffolding that you were talking about?"
Yeah. So basically, one of the main challenges with service catalogs and all of that, or let's say software templates in the Backstage lingo or scaffolders or whatever we want to call them, is that in most solutions, we have to duplicate our work. Right. So we define our, let's say, CRDs in Kubernetes or our XRDs if we're doing crossplane, or promises, I think they're called in Cradix, right? Or whatever they are. We're defining all these things. And then I go to my portal and have to define that all over again. If there's like AWS service catalog or all of these things where I end up duplicating my configurations. And that's a major pain in the behind. Because what that ends up doing is we get stale service catalogs that are not up to date. It makes us duplicate our work. They end up being out of sync from one another, and it's just bad. What we've done is there's a plugin now called the Kubernetes Ingester, which basically looks for any XRD or CRD in a Kubernetes cluster, depending on configuration, and will auto-generate. Because CRDs are open API schemas, there is no reason that we can't convert an open API schema to JSON schema, which is what's used in the Backstage software template. In the end, what we want to do is always the same. Scaffold a YAML file, push that to Git. It's not that complex. So in order to do that, we generate a template with a static, let's say, backend, what the steps are going to be, and it templates it out and pushes it up to a Git repo. Right. This is something, it does exist. I will mention this. This exists as well with the Kubernetes connector in Port. There is, they had introduced this as well. There is a way to do it there. There's a way to do it here. There's differences in how we've implemented it, and there's differences in some of the capabilities that each of them provide that may be to the liking or disliking of certain people. But that's the nice thing with, being able to build integrations, is that you can change them. If you don't like the opinions that come, change it and build one of your own using Port's SDK to build an integration, or writing Backstage plugins, or contributing to existing ones. Again, it's open source in the Backstage world, so very easy at that level. But that's basically what it's doing.
That's cool. Sebi, do you want to talk any more about the same mechanism happening in Port?
Yeah. Well, as Scott mentioned, we can point to any CRD, and that will scaffold the blueprints, and that will also scaffold the self-service action. And by the way, I discovered that by preparing my interviews for Port, and I saw the video of Victor demoing that, and that was really the moment I say, "Wow, I love this product. I need to join this company." But yeah, cool. It's we are in line on this.
So when I was saying the things I wanted to know today, like, are my resources discoverable? This is the mechanism that makes what I create elsewhere discoverable in my portal.
Well, it's correct? An element of that. It's an element of that, right? Because this is about the service discovery of a template, of service offerings, let's say that part, right? Bringing in an XRD and creating a, catalog item that I can go and request a new RDS instance or a new Postgres cluster, a new app. That's one thing. The other element of it is, how do I ingest a deployment from Kubernetes or an EC2 instance from AWS, an actual instantiation of that service that was not created via the portal, right? Which is another element of this.
And so in these two technologies, is the instantiation, even if it's created elsewhere, is it viewable in the single pane of glass portal?
I can go. Yeah. Because in Port, all we and I think in Backstage the same. All we do is we collect some payload and we trigger a backend, and this backend should commit it to a Git repo, and in the end we are listening, looking for custom
the Git
resources
repo.
or anything, and it will come back in the catalog. So it's
So
I have a question about catalogs in the sense that you all both showed how much detail you can get, right? You can get your deployments, you can get your namespaces, you can get, your Jira tickets, all these things. Can I not have some of those things? Like, in the sense of who gets to make the decision about like cognitive load of like, pushing everything through versus pushing the right things through? How does that get designed in your two different products?
Scott,
So
maybe
I can say
yeah.
I can say from the Backstage side, there's a few elements to that, right? There's different ways of approaching this. I think that in the end, there's design practices. One of the things that I like about Backstage that's very different, I think, than the model of Port, it's just different philosophies, is that Backstage actually forces me to a specific model, right? Port comes and says, build your own design domain, right? Build your own blueprints, your own entities, customize that to how you want. Backstage says, no. You have a very structured thing of a component, a resource, a system, a domain. Yeah, you can add your own. It's completely not recommended at any level, but you can. But you're supposed to stay within a structure. And that structure, I think, is actually a good thing. Because one of the things that we see failures of is when people try to adapt technology to themselves instead of adapting themselves to the technology trend. And then what you end up is all these weird things with Argo CD creating some custom resource that waits for someone to create an approval that's going to commit an approval ID on that. And then it's going to merge like with the Terraform Flux CD, whatever implementation that was terrible in my mind, right? Because like if you're in Kubernetes, you don't want manual approvals. It's about consistent reconciliation, like stop with Terraform plans. And I think that in the end, Backstage forces me into that model. And once we're in that model, that means that you're not supposed to expose everything in the portal. Now, how I visualize things, there is permission framework that you can do conditional rendering of things and all of that. There are dynamic plugins like the homepage plugin in Backstage where a user could define what he wants to see, which widgets they want to see. But the important thing is that Backstage is a framework for building platform, for building portals, and is not a portal. The biggest mistake people say is Backstage is a developer portal. No, it isn't. It is a TypeScript, React, Node.js framework for you to build a portal exactly how you want. So you want to give developers the freedom, create, customizable widgets. Awesome. You want it to be hard-coded, hard-code it yourself. So it's any way you want in Backstage because it's just a framework.
I don't know about you. I'm a back-end developer or a infrastructure style developer, and I'm great at TypeScript. I think that's the one where you tend to get the arguments or the challenges for people, right? Sebi,
for sure.
How does like reducing cognitive load or managing like what gets displayed in the UI happen in the Port side of things?
Yeah, well, you have those blueprints with tons of information, and if you want, you can show all of this on the dashboard. Or the platform builder can decide to hide some stuff, also depending on the persona that logs in. But the user itself can also just by clicking around say, "Hey, hide me those fields, save that," and it will be removed from his dashboard, from his service catalog. So it's really flexible. But I think all the info should be in the blueprint, and then it's up to the users and the builders to decide what they can see or not. And yeah, it's all doable by clicking around. Again, no code approach, of course, all backed by API or the Terraform provider. Yeah.
We have some questions in chat. Thank you, chat. The first one is, how can Port, and let's do this for both, how can each of these be securely integrated into an enterprise environment? So we'll start with you.
With me?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. I
don't know, but you did it. So Port is a SaaS only. So it won't run in your premises. Let's make that clear. What we don't do inbound connections. So all the data that we ingest will be pushed to us. So it's basically a controller that you install on Kubernetes, a GitHub application, and they can decide exactly what will be pushed to us. Okay, and most of the time in your portal, it will be metadata. You won't push critical, sensitive data to your portal. So that's how we work.
Excellent. And Backstage, how's Backstage integrated to a secure environment?
So Backstage can be self-hosted. There are hosting providers of Backstage, but typically what most people are doing is self-hosting Backstage, and then it can be self-hosted within your environment. If you use tools like Roadie, there are proxies you can install locally. The main difference is that architecturally, Backstage is a pull model. Backstage requests data from external systems. Port, as Sebastian mentioned, is the opposite. You push data into Port. Right. So the Kubernetes controller will push data into Port. Backstage will call out to Kubernetes to get the data. That is one of the reasons that it is very important for Backstage to be deployed in an environment that has access to things. But it's much more controlled. Also, it's in your environment and you decide it. Again, it's a philosophical debate of the pull versus push with metrics, with observability, with everything. It is a question of pull versus push. I personally believe in the pull model, just because you always get the most up-to-date data at any point in time because I am pulling in that data versus typically like controllers that push things aren't going to be pushing every 1 second. So like I get streams of logs from Kubernetes very easily because I'm doing a pull model, right? I don't have certain challenges that exist with the push model. Push model also has its benefits from a security perspective, so it goes back and forth.
But wouldn't you still have time delays on pulls? So like that's why you sped up the demo for
No, I sped up the demo because of Flux CD. I sped it up because of Flux CD.
Which is pulling and
because,
pushing, right? Like, so
but Flux
it's interesting,
has a
right?
minimum of a
scalability challenge that, as you say, depends on the environment. I once sat into a very long debate over pull versus push with Chef versus Ansible, and it depends on your environment. But I just want to call out that is like a scalability thing depending on what you want. They both have sort of timelines that you can set as aggressively as you want or as patiently as you want to go with.
Exactly. I think one of the nice things is though, like specifically with like the Backstage model of like front-end plugins is the idea that we only pull data when it's requested. So versus in like Port where I'm always ingesting the data, right? The Kubernetes controller is always going to send data to Port in the push model, whether anyone is going to access it or not. That network traffic is still happening. I'm still sending the data versus in the Backstage Kubernetes plugin, for example, it will call out to Kubernetes, say, hey, what pods exist? Right. And then I'll get that data in the UI. So there's maybe a quicker response sometimes from Port because the data is already there. From Backstage, there's much less network traffic happening on a general level because we're only pulling what we need when I need it instead of it continuously being updated in the system, which I think is more of the dumb portal idea.
Differentiators there. That's really helpful. Nice.
We have another question from chat. How do you manage permissions in these portals? Is all the information available to everyone, or how do you separate per team or per project? Sebi, let's start with you, please.
Yeah, I'm really happy with this question because I can say, yes, you can connect your IDP to your IDP. No, because speaking about your identity, and I've been working years and years for the Keycloak project. I don't know if you know, it's an open source IDP. So for me, IDP is identity. But anyway, you can take your Keycloak, your Google Authenticator. Anyway, you plug that into Port and you find back your walls, your teams. And of course, you can, we have a complete airbag in Port. And I guess it's the same in Backstage.
Excellent. Anything you want to add, Scott?
So Backstage is unique in this area. Backstage is unique because Backstage, again, is a framework for building a platform and not a product like Port is. And therefore, how you do this is completely dependent on how you want to. There is a permission framework in Backstage. There is a authentication framework in Backstage. So there are authentication providers. You add them in, you get login, all of that. Great. You can ingest users from different identity providers. All of that works great. OIDC, LDAP, whatever you want, it works. From a permission perspective, the permission framework comes from a very different perspective, which is let's do everything in TypeScript and define our policies in TypeScript. I don't know many teams that like that. Maybe at Spotify. And therefore, one of the great things in Backstage being such a vibrant community is there are 2 RBAC plugins that have been built that put a UI above this that created a dynamic TypeScript plugin. So it's a UI or a CSV file, and we can come in and say, these users can view catalog entities that have this annotation or this tag or this naming convention, or can view this page or can't view this page. It's very flexible, but nothing comes out of the box. It's all integration within Backstage. So it's more flexible, I would say, because you can build whatever you want in TypeScript. But it also means you have a lot more work than you do with a, let's say, product that's off the shelf.
So are you saying Backstage is harder to build your portal?
I think that Backstage is going to be harder to get started for an organization because there is more upfront work that you need to do. I would disagree that it is more work in the long term due to the growing community and the amount of plugins that exist out there, the amount of these things. I think that has to have some weight. I think that has some weight in terms of like the amount of 233 plugins, like I mentioned, publicly available that integrate with all these different systems. So the amount of work you have to do is relatively low when we want to integrate with any system, right? But that initial getting started, the amount of time till I get my MVP, my minimal viable portal, is going to be higher with something like Backstage than it is with something like Port, Cortex, whatever tool we talk about that's an actual product. It's definitely going to be more. That's where maybe a tool like Roadie makes sense for someone, which is a hosted Backstage, and then getting started with Roadie versus Port, about the same. Again, because it's just a SaaS offering with all of this built in for you.
Okay, I have a remedial question. You both talked about plugins. What does plugin mean in this context? What let's say you each have a MongoDB plugin. Is that an accurate thing? You'd have a plugin around? What does that look like in Port versus Backstage?
Well, I can start. Plugin. Well, let's keep the plugin for the end, but it's more, we speak more about exporters. You create an exporter to export data to Port, rather than speaking about plugins. By the way, the framework to create those exporters is open source. It's called Ocean Integration. Okay. And we have one plugin. Well, we have a plugin framework, which is a Backstage plugin framework. Yeah. So, and it's pretty nice. Basically, it's a Backstage plugin framework to ingest data from Port or send data from Backstage back to Port. So that's where we have a plugin. It's a really nice stuff for people that started their journey with Backstage and that invested a lot of time and resources, and they want to explore Port. So that's a good way to discover Port as well.
That's cool. And so when you say plugin, when you're talking about Backstage, what do you mean exactly?
So there are 2 types of plugins in Backstage, but Backstage, again, is just a core that everything we want to add. You want to integrate with Kubernetes, you have the Kubernetes plugin. You want to integrate with AWS, you have the AWS plugin. It adds functionality. Now, there's 2 types of plugins. There's a backend plugin and a front-end plugin. A backend plugin will be what goes and calls the AWS API and returns. Basically, it's an API. It's a backend element that's going to go and make the call out to some external system and bring that data in and process it. And then a front-end plugin would be like a React component, typically. It's just hey, this is the table that we're going to show something in. This is the graph that we saw. It's something that's from the front end that typically comes front end with a back end that pulls the data from the back end and visualizes it.
All right, one more question from chat right now. Is Backstage better to have installed in an isolated Kubernetes cluster? And we'll ask a similar question about Port too.
So Backstage does not need to be installed in an isolated Kubernetes cluster. The one thing I would say is that typically you are giving Backstage credentials to external systems. So make sure, like anything in Kubernetes, that you have multi-tenancy set up correctly and that you have protection from, don't let every user go and access the config map of the app config.yaml and the secrets there, because you probably have credentials for your IDP and for Kubernetes clusters and for all of that. But there is absolutely no reason it needs to be in a dedicated cluster as long as you set up correct RBAC and network policies. It's in the end a single pod, or you can have multiple replicas. Depends on Postgres and Redis if you want scale.
Okay.
So yeah, no real challenges there and no need to be in an isolated cluster.
And any word about installing and running Port?
Well, we are SaaS only, so there's no really question of installing
Cool.
our exporters. But our exporters, most of them can be installed as pods, as controllers in Kubernetes. So just to make the link with
a very important question, and that is, which is better, Victor, Backstage or Port?
Don't put me there. No. I'm not answering that question. I'm not answering that question.
Victor's been lurking backstage on and off for a while, and I've been trying to keep a straight face. Welcome, Victor. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, glad to be here.
What is important when we're talking about Backstage and Port? Like, when we're comparing them with one another, what should we be thinking about?
I feel that there are three important things. First, does it do or will it do what you need it to do? Right? I have relatively low expectations from portals because I think that they are just one of the many components of a platform. When I say low expectations, I don't mean to degrade, but they're just tiny part of the big picture, right? Another thing is, what can we do with it today? And the third one would be, what's the future of that something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that the answers to the second and the third question vary greatly between those projects.
So
I'd
that's
add a third of maintenance cost as well, right? When you say it's a small piece, there's always a part of any tool that you pick of like, is it a differentiator for your org? Therefore, put your organization's developer time and energy into it, or is it not? And like that kind of
absolutely,
thing.
absolutely, 100%. Kind of, you said it better than I was about to say. I was about to say how crazy you will be after adopting one of those two.
This is like the ghost of friendly Victor. What is this ghost like? What?
So we're running low on time, so I want to ask each of you before we do our conclusion. So what is the future for your project? So Scott, we'll start with you. What's the future for Backstage?
So I think the future for Backstage is looking really, really bright and really good. Backstage is the only solution that is part of a open source foundation in this area that is gaining huge amounts of traction right now. And we're seeing major vendors making big plays here of building plugins, of integrating it. Red Hat with their developer hub. VMware did it with Tanzu application platform, Sneak, all of these companies really investing heavily in it. That I think that we're starting to really see a lot of growth in that area. And I would recommend everyone to watch the other video that was done on this channel by Victor talking about Backstage and its future, because I think it's a great video. But in the end, I think that the future of Backstage is really bright. And I think we're at a level where it's becoming very mature.
Excellent. And Sebi, what's the future of Port like?
The future, so I'm a dev, I'm not in the product team, so, but but I think we want to go beyond the term IDP, internal developer portal. We just want to bring new experiences to not only developers but anyone in the organization, and yeah, I would just conclude with if you want to build a portal your way, go for a port.
And then actually,
one quick note here. It was enough confusing that we got IDP that is identity provider, an IDP that is an internal developer platform, Now you guys started saying that IDP is internal developer portal, and I'm going crazy.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Hold on. But Sebastian wants to change this because he wants Port to be not just for developers. So it's actually going to be an IP, an internal portal, at which point you should just wait till version 7 of Port and then just call it IPv7.
Good one.
Okay, with that, let's do our closing statements. Scott, why should we vote for Backstage?
So Backstage is the most customizable open framework for building a portal. It is completely community driven right now with huge investment from large amounts of companies and large vendors, and is a really fun project and great community to be a part of. And it's CNCF. Yay, baby.
Yeah, baby. Thanks so much, Scott. See you next time you're a guest on the show. Bye.
See ya.
And Sebi, why should we vote for Port?
Port is completely flexible. You can create your experiences. And just to brag a bit, GitHub just picked Port. All the developers at GitHub will be using Port because they were really excited by this. So yeah, try it out. It's free. And you will love it.
Super cool. Thank you so much. Thanks for being a guest. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
And that's that. Please vote. Victor, what do you have to say?
Well, both are very different projects. Kind of, I couldn't. I think if you ask me this question, you didn't ask me a question. But if you ask me a question that I'm imagining you would be asking me half a year ago, I would say Port without doubt. Now I'm not sure anymore because I see Port as a better solution today, and I see Backstage as a more guaranteed future.
That makes sense with any community-driven versus privately owned comparison, I would say. Do you agree with that?
Not any, but yeah.
Most, yes.
I would say,
we
yeah.
cannot speak in absolutes in this industry.
Yeah. Also, I started a while ago make strong differentiation between open source and open source in a foundation.
And that's because of like Terraform, for example.
Because people were not aware in the past that actually every project is owned by somebody, even if it's open source. So there is a potentially huge difference between this owned by company Acme and this owned by a foundation on many different levels.
And what are a couple of those differences?
To begin with, foundation is less likely to impose the rules that are going against community behind the project. Right? So that could be license change, that could be fees, that could be this or that. I'm saying it actually less likely, not as impossible, right? But basically, the purpose of foundation, at least on paper, without going now into practice, is to protect those projects, right? From the companies, including the companies that own the projects before they were donated to a foundation, right? It's a assurance policy in a way.
Cool. Well, that's a wrap on graphical user interfaces, or GUIs. We use the word portal a lot more than GUI during this episode. Please vote. The vote graphic is outdated. Go vote in the CNCF Slack. The information is in the description of this email. I can never remember the word description, and I called it an email. This video. Go there and cast your vote. The voting's live now, and it lasts for 3 days. So if you're watching a recording, you can still vote. Maybe go check it out. And if you have more questions for the users, you can ask them in the video, or you could also ask them in our You Choose channel in the CNCF Slack. Thank you, Abby, for being a guest host today. Yes.
Don't put me up on a vote against Victor. That's all I ask.
I think we all want the same. Yeah. And then next week, join us next week. We're going to talk about specialized templating. So we've been talking about having an internal developer platform that's backed by APIs. We talked about GUIs now as a wrapper for your API, and now we're going to have an episode about other wrappers for your API. So we're going to talk about a lot of things that honestly I've never heard of, like WRF and Porter and Score and Pipe CD, and I forget the last one, but it's going to be fun. I have a lot
we
to
should
learn.
have. Is that the MISC category, right?
No, that's specialized templating for next
Ah,
week.
but yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds
Okay.
It's gonna be
exciting.
fun. So
Yeah.
join us.
Kind of like it's. Any of you tried the gumbo food?
A gumbo?
Yeah, it's
the
the
surprise.
Oh,
type of
gumbo,
food.
like
Yeah, when you put
Louisiana.
anything, random stuff. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like put it in it and then you give it a name. And it's not MISC. It's, how did you say? What did you say?
Specialized templating. We do have a
That's the
miscellaneous
one, yes.
episode
Yeah,
after
yeah.
specialized templating, though. Great. Hopefully, none of our guests cancel in between now and then after that introduction.
Hey, you told me to jump in, kind of, if I can. You
I
see
regret
how
everything.
terrible of a mistake you're making. Let me.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.